All right, I'll get this straight one of these days. All right, we have, the first order of business is the minutes of December 14th. Do I hear a second, a move and a second? Judy?
I'll second.
And James.
Any corrections or comments, et cetera? Or are they everybody happy with the draft?
I have a boring correction. The principal, John D'Entremont, he spells his name with an H-N.
John?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh. I didn't know where you were going with that.
I
For where
did.
to put an H in Entremont.
Oh, I see, yeah.
oh, it's H-O-N instead of A?
J-O-H-N, as opposed to J-O-N, which is like how Jonathan Vogel spells his name.
Oh,
You get some choices with the name Jonathan.
And John is on,
Okay.
and Vince Burke is also on.
Ah, very good.
Awesome.
Vince who?
Vince Burke. He spoke, last time
He
here.
did.
All right.
All right. All those in favor of the minutes as submitted?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Dick, I'm abstaining as I wasn't here.
One
Oh.
abstention.
All right. The way the agenda is set up is we have the town first, and I think the town will be fairly short, so why don't we get with the town?
No,
No, I don't think we have any town.
That's
Yeah.
next week.
Oh,
We're just doing the school today.
You're making
oh,
me nervous.
all right, why did I bring the town?
You're just helping us out, showing what's coming. You
All right.
give us a
Yeah,
little
okay,
teaser
think
there.
about that.
All right.
My little reminder.
Now, on the school, we got a revised Lyme School budget district thing from you or Janet or whoever.
Oh, Janet, she's.
And we'll start out with that official, what you have to say about the changes. I found two in that. If you can explain what the changes were and why.
Sure. So the first change is reduction in teacher salaries and benefits because we have a retirement, and that was a longstanding person, Steve Dano, and so someone who's farther up on the salary scale, and we anticipate we should be able to refill that position with someone at a master's, maybe 2 years experience, but that's just, we might be able to find somebody even farther down, but we expect we should be able to save, you know, around 30,000 in that, with that just change in staff.
That was one of
So
the,
this,
And where was that? Just
that was
it's gonna
in
be
the,
under direct instruction, teacher salaries, it's the first line in the direct instruction group.
it's on page 3, isn't it, at the top of it? No.
Regular instruction.
So it's gonna, no, it's gonna be on page 1.
page 1.
1151.
Yeah, it's the very top line in the 1100 group, teacher salaries and instruction.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
Mike, page
Right
one.
there,
What
okay.
did you
There you go,
say?
they have right underneath regular instruction, it's the first line.
Right down
Yeah, but that's a subline, not the total line. I didn't
there.
figure.
Oh, all right.
The
Oh,
total
this
line is
oh, C
on
section.
page 3, actually.
Oh, for the group?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't, as the budget committee, I haven't looked at the little lines usually.
That's,
And there was another change that
Yep.
I saw here also.
so this second change is in special ed. And that was taking out special ed contracted services, which was 103,776, and replacing the contracted services with 2 full-time paraprofessionals, which would come in at $83,203. And the end result with those 2 addition subtraction is 20,572, so it's a overall reduction of 20,572.
I had 570.74.
Janet, could you walk through that one more time?
Sure. So,
Special ed,
special ed contracted services,
which is.
do you wanna know what page that's on?
Yeah.
Special ed contracted services, it's gonna be on page 4. And it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th one down.
okay,
So that went to 0,
yep,
and it was a reduction from, the last budget iteration was 103,776. Tell me when you're ready.
okay.
Okay, and then that was replaced with 2 full-time paraprofessionals, which hit the same group but on page 3. And it hits under elementary special ed. It's the second line down, it says staff salaries, elementary special ed. So that line was increased by 2 full-time people with it's benefits as well, so it's a whole group. It's salaries and taxes and benefits, and so there's a whole bunch of lines that it actually affects.
Okay.
But the total that went into those lines is 83,203. So the end result is an overall reduction of 20,572 in that special ed category.
I had 20,570.74.
Yeah, I didn't put any pennies in, I took the pennies out on everything,
I
yeah.
think you have to with DRA still, don't you?
Yeah, and you can't have any pennies on the revenue side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they rejected our report one year
Yeah.
when we sent it in with the pennies.
They don't like pennies, yeah.
So I just had a question, since you're gonna be hiring paras, you're confident you'll be able to hire them versus what you're contracting the services for before? Was that like a sure bet, or?
We're kind of hoping that the employment market's going to improve a little bit. So, yeah, we're hoping that we'll be able to do that. It's a tough market still right now. But
The thing
that's
I've
our
been
goal.
reading is it's getting better though,
It is getting better, yeah, it is getting
because
better.
people are running out of all that special free money that came in as part of the COVID thing.
There you go, much better, so. Yeah, so
So overall, again, what was the,
So the overall was a decrease of 51,828 and pennies.
yeah,
it's roughly a 0.6%, down to about 7.5.
yeah,
And we were at 8.1
yeah.
the last time we came in.
And what are we now?
7.6?
7.52.
7.52.
And that reflects the correction from last time where something was added instead of subtracted?
It was just a change, personnel changes.
Oh, but I think he's referring to some other error.
It's not accounting for the intended you know what I mean, the intended deficit. It's correct, I guess is the short way to put it.
All right, now, I know you have something you wanna present,
Yes.
and I have something that I wanna present a little later. You're presenting it as you, not as the school board.
The finance committee.
The finance committee is not the school board.
No,
The school board reports to the budget committee, not the finance committee.
okay, then
So therefore, it is you that are making the presentation.
that's fine.
Before you do that, can I just ask, so these were the changes you made to go from the 8 to 7.52?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Yep.
very important, that, just like what I have to say is me, not the budget committee,
And Dick,
after her presentation.
I had a question, I apologize I was not here, last time. I have questions about reserve funds that can go to offset some of these expenses.
I think that will come up when we discuss the warrant articles, because anything we take out of a reserve fund is warrant article, correct? Other than the,
If it comes, yeah,
If
we
there's
have to
fund balance.
vote to approve to.
Yeah,
there's
I don't know
certain
that we
things the
need to
school
vote
board
to
is the
approve-
agent.
We don't need to vote to approve the withdrawal of money from trust funds. We need to
Yeah, you
vote
do.
to approve
Yes,
the
you do.
add.
yes, you do.
You do, but you do it on the board level, so the school
I
board has
see.
the authority to vote to expend from trust.
Some
But-
trust funds, not all of them.
Well, all of the school trust funds, the school board has the authority.
Do
to
they have them
expend.
for every one of them?
Yeah, they do.
So-
But to put money into the trust, it's a town vote.
So let's take the rest of those questions up after.
Yeah, good, I wanted to just
Yeah.
know when is a good time to ask that question.
We'll
It'll
get to the
come
warrant
around.
articles maybe in,
Good, thank
before
you.
the night is over. But right now, we're talking about the operating budget, I believe. Is that what you're,
Yeah, I mean, it's about the operating budget. It gets to some of the questions that Bill Malcolm was asking last week, and he asked if I would put some data together. So I can present the data or not, but in fairness, it is also a presentation that's meant to communicate to the budget committee some of the, like, conflicts that the school board, the majority of the board members have with this budget, and giving context to specific questions and directives we've given as a board to the school administration. Reflecting our concern about the sustainability of the budget.
I would think that that would be appropriate to come from the board after the board has
a chance to review it?
reviewed it and you have a board vote.
Yeah.
And then you put forth the board
Yeah.
opinion as a board.
Yeah.
So there is an opportunity next week.
Next
So
week,
I can do it next week then, cause
Well-
then I can present it to the school board tomorrow night, and then I can bring it back next week. The board's feeling is that our policies are such that the committee can present, that I as a school board representative and member of the finance committee can present to this
well,
body, but it
No.
doesn't have to happen tonight.
well, my feeling is this. I don't want the budget committee to get into the internal bickering within the school board. What comes to the budget committee can either come as individuals, be Elizabeth, be
Yeah.
you, be another school board member, but they can present it as an individual. But when we're presenting something as the school, it has to go through the school board and the superintendent and be voted as the position of the school board. And I think the budget committee wants to act on the position of the school board, not of individuals within the school board. But I think we'd like to hear what individuals feel about various things. There's a difference.
Right.
Do people generally on the budget committee agree with that presentation of it?
Yeah, I would prefer to hear from the school board instead of the individual committees on the school board. And I would also say that, we'll also have a public hearing on this budget, right?
That is correct. That's the
Yeah.
next,
2 weeks, is that 2 weeks?
no, next week, we as a budget committee will agree what we present and warn for the public hearing. But we don't vote to either recommend or not recommend it next week.
No,
We do that after the public hearing.
right,
But we do have to reach an agreement as to what we're gonna warn for the public hearing.
yes, okay, so I'm just saying that the public hearing is also an opportunity to voice overall concerns about the budget. I don't, yeah, I wouldn't be that happy about, getting into debate about some of these things here in the budget committee, is what I'm trying to say. I think we started to get into that a little bit last time, and I don't think it's productive for us as a budget committee to, debate, some of these, school budget things. I mean, maybe I'm wrong in that, but, it doesn't seem to be productive here unless there are specific things that we can point to. I think, in fact, I'll say that I thought Mr. Burke's presentation was not productive. There was no suggestion about where changes in the budget might be made. It was just a general, it sounded to me more like a general complaint about the budget, but there weren't any specifics given about where changes could be made. So that's the kind of thing that I don't think is productive for our community.
Well, do you have anything you wanna present tonight?
I mean, in terms of being, you know, in my position as, I can speak for myself and I can speak for as the school board representative to the budget committee. The school board hasn't voted on this budget, right? And so the school board needs to take a vote on this budget.
Right.
And, you know, at the last school board meeting, which was the 15th of December, which was one night after this budget committee meeting, we made a motion and asked the administration of the school to look at some very specific things, issues that we have. To give voice to one particular issue, because I'm the one who made the motion, you know, we moved as a school to a DA structure in 2017. And aligned with that DA structure, we had a principal who took on superintendent responsibilities, and we hired an academic director to fulfill some of the roles of the principal. And as a school, we've now moved back to a model in which we have a part-time superintendent and a full-time principal. And the board wants to understand the role of that academic director position, which is relatively expensive. We don't understand why it exists anymore.
So I read.
And so that has caused, I think, a consternation that, and as a board member and representative to the budget committee, I would like for people to understand the logic and the data-driven logic behind that question and the expectations we have as a board for an answer to that question that would be satisfying.
I think that's an issue that can be brought up next week when the board and the administration have gotten together of how to address that change in the administrative organization, for lack of a better way of wording it. Because it does have financial repercussions.
Yes.
And it's my understanding that not everybody is on board with that.
That's precisely true.
And whatever the school board decides to do for that should be what's presented to the budget committee, but it should be presented after the school board and the school administration have gotten together and gotten their ducks in line. And that should be what is presented to the budget committee. Do people agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think that is something for the school board to work out.
Yeah.
So the school board meets tomorrow,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
tune in.
We'll see you next week with the answers. How's that sound?
Yeah, no, and I would say, I would think that is the appropriate way to do it, and then if you as an individual, or several of you as individuals want a further consideration, you could suggest maybe this action should be taken and then have a discussion on that, rather than, this is a time for the board's presentation, and that should be a follow-up to it.
I didn't catch all that.
Yeah, that's okay. So we can, you know, present this presentation essentially to the board tomorrow night and
To the
get
school
their,
board.
yeah, and get their
Yeah.
feedback, but then you would entertain me having the presentation here, which is more of an overall presentation about school costs, comparing our school costs to schools that are comparator schools. You know, essentially providing some background data to support our assertion as a board that it is not impossible to operate our school and get good outcomes as defined by the school for less money.
Okay,
Because
so
So
we
I
do
do
think
that.
you could present that to us as
Yeah.
well, but I
Right.
think that we want to have.
Following the board presentation, and if you have a write-up of it before the meeting, you know, that'd be great to send that out too, so people can be
Yeah.
thinking about it, but
that sounds fine,
I don't think we should be going down that path personally tonight.
sounds good.
I have something that I did, and I'm gonna present it just as the numbers that were in your spreadsheets. But I broke them down into categories that I called high school, administration, K through 8, what I call instructional, and miscellaneous. Part of that is miscellaneous and part is other. And the easiest thing for me to do is just pass out this spreadsheet. And what it shows to me, just so you know, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm saying it caused a great deal of concern with me just listing the numbers without any explanation. Because it showed basically the education part, the high school went up, but that is driven by the number of students. We don't control the numbers. The K through 8 basically went down. Part of that is some reprogramming, as I understand, plus your faculty retirement. But that isn't on the spreadsheet per se, so I'm not saying it's wrong. And then I was alarmed at the increase in the administration, and part of that was adding a position in administration. But it just shows to me what I saw as an issue that's come up in education everywhere is it seems to be a big growth in administrative expenses and not in a similar vote in the, what I call instructional expenses. Classic example is Dartmouth College. The number of administrators has grown horrendously over the last 20 years. The number of professors hasn't. And I just don't want that same thing to happen to the Lyme School.
I think one issue though, Dick, is that in the budget that's proposed this year, the Director of Student Services, Jeff Tomlinson's salary moved from the SPED line
All right.
to the admin line.
I'm saying this
But he's not new, he's not a new administrator.
Right.
You had a, I think, a 66% decrease in
Well.
another line that
What, would you
moved to the
pass?
admin line.
All right, here,
Hand me the stack picking a little bit.
yeah. What I'm saying is this spreadsheet was based solely on the sheet that was presented by the
Yes.
board. I didn't try to explain the differences, I just said what they were as were presented.
Oh, good.
And my concern about it was just as presented,
Yeah,
it shows all the cuts seem, or static seems to be in what I call the education part of the budget. And all the growth seems to be happening in administration. And that's not what I would like to see.
Totally understand that.
And I thought it was better to just not try to interpret it, just give people the numbers and give you a chance to explain why this is happening and that it isn't just, as the numbers say. Because there'll be people at town meeting that will just pull the numbers out of the spreadsheet.
Right. So, at the SAU level, the Director of Student Services, that position, at a good healthy salary and benefits, has always been carried in special education in the high school and elementary line. So you should see a fairly good decrease in special education that offsets that increase for that salary, because if you remember when I spoke to you last, couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks, whatever, we tried to do some work with cleaning up coding and making sure that our expenses are in the places where they're actually happening, so that we can have a better planning document when we look at our budget. And so the costs at the elementary school actually went down because we did a zero-based budget, and we were able to come in with numbers that represent what teachers felt they actually needed to have to operate the school. So a big piece of that SAU cost is that switch. Another piece is that we have added a administrative assistant, and that is new. That is the only addition in the budget, actually, is an administrative assistant to assist in the SAU office, because it's just swamped in there. People are.
So
there
it's not a
are
high
out there
salary
limits,
position.
and we need to support them, so,
It sounds like it's the same thing I found in one office I had.
yeah.
The captain in charge of the office was very upset at the lieutenants and lieutenant commanders typing letters.
Exactly. So, we attempted to hire that person, and we had someone who didn't quite fit well for us, and so right now we don't have that position. But that would be new in the budget, not there previously. That's the only administrative changes I can think of.
Relative
It's
to
not really
20.
growth.
Yeah, because I think last year you had budgeted for a superintendent. I ended up coming in as an interim, and I don't take benefits and all that kind of thing. I just have a more of a contracted kind of arrangement, but, yeah, I think that's the only change. I think there's anything else, is there, Janet, that would be
So,
substantial?
the only other thing I can see is, but it's a very similar reason, is the technology piece. Because we coded that out separately as well.
Yeah,
Took
that
it out of
showed up as
instruction.
part of,
That's
Yeah.
what-
I thought it
That
was a
doesn't go to
system at
admin.
first, rather than the technology classroom for teaching students, so therefore it was in teaching
Yeah.
rather than admin when I looked at it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why it's listed on my little spreadsheet as teaching or instructional,
Right.
and it's coded as an instructional position.
Reading specialist?
The technology
Yeah,
is.
so for technology, we have,
That's in the line. It's in the line.
at which would be in general ed, I believe, a assistant, a general ed assistant who does technology, who's, this young man is specifically to help teachers get kids online, to solve all those computer, printer problems, login problems, all that kind of stuff. So that's there. There is, I don't know how the integrator piece is coded, Janet?
And under the library.
Under library,
Yeah.
so that piece is there. And then we have a consultant who works with us to take care of the internet issues, comes in 2 half-days a week essentially.
But those
And
are all
does the heavy
tech
duty stuff.
costs, they're
That's
not
fine, I agree.
integrated in the admin line.
No,
No,
Right,
we're
no.
talking
No,
about
she's talking
technology.
about a
Yeah.
different
He's talking
line.
about-
No,
There's
but
other movement,
when
but,
I looked at the DRA code, it started with, I guess, what is it, 22 is elementary education? Or 20,
So that's
whatever it is.
support, elementary
Or no.
support services.
But anyway, it was in the code with the as a teaching position, rather than in the series of code, no, the first 2 numbers in the accounting code,
Yeah.
which are admin, that has the school board and that in it. They have a different
Yep.
first 2 numbers.
Right.
But that technology had 2 numbers of elementary education as the first 2 numbers. So that's why I put it there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
I would piggyback on what you're saying though, and I don't think that we've had unusual growth in our administrative costs this year over last year. But I would say as a generality, running an SAU that includes 1 school is relatively expensive. And what you see, and what you'll see next week in the data that I show you, is that when you limit our school to comparator schools, in general, those schools that belong to larger SAUs have lower cost per pupils. And one of the reasons, and there's never just gonna be one reason for that, but one reason is that they're able to share costs, share resources. They have maybe, depending on the size of the SAU, they may have no one has more than 1 superintendent. You might have assistants or not have assistants. There's all sorts of stuff. And that one is a choice that our district has made, to be an SAU of 1 school. And I'm not here to argue that it's a good choice or a bad choice. I'm just here to highlight the fact that it's an expensive choice. However, I have no presentation of solution for that, right? Because in my mind, if we were going to actually consolidate with another district, it would be Dresden. And I don't think they would entertain a conversation about consolidating with us, because they make tuition revenue. Why would they want to? What would be like sort of quote unquote in it for them? All they would be doing in Dresden is exacerbating the conflicts that they have as a board, because Norwich has the same problem that Lyme does, right? And so so it's sort of it's somewhat of a moot point to make, but it's something to be aware, I think it's something to be aware of when people say, hey, we have a relatively high cost per pupil compared to schools X, Y, and Z, to offer that as one variable, Y, and then say to people, do you value being an SAU of one school?
Well,
Yeah,
And
I
if
think-
the
I
answer
think
is
it's good to
yes,
have that
then we can
information.
move
Right.
forward
Yeah.
and talk about, we can talk about the budget in some other way, right?
Right.
Like, how can we address issues?
What I'm trying to say when I look at that, there are a couple of things that cost us money that are purely penny pinching. As long as you have school choice, you're not gonna be able to negotiate the lowest high school tuition rate. If you agree, all the students are gonna go to the cheapest high school, you're gonna save money in your ability to negotiate the contract with whatever school they go to. And the same thing goes with the SAU. If you join an SAU on the budget basis to reduce the administrative line, if you go into it and say, if we go to a single high school, it's Hanover, if we go to an SAU combined, it will be Dresden. That's not a decision that's based solely on finances. And if the budget committee, I don't know that those are the decisions the budget committee should be involved in, but I think we should be aware that the decisions that have been made of school choice in a single school SAU do cost money.
I wanna, add that, I concur with you, Dick, about, being concerned about the rising cost of the administration, but I think that, as the superintendent pointed out, this rise we see is an accounting change.
Some of it is.
Some of it is.
Not all of it, I mean, there are salary increases,
Right.
there are the year-to-year
Well,
increases.
we just heard about
It's
it,
like
we just heard
Jim's.
about it,
Yes.
okay. So, but I just wanna say I'm concerned about it, I don't think that we're seeing that, I don't think we're seeing the increases that we might be concerned about right now, though we did have a principal superintendent who did save us some money for a while, I wanna make that point, that other structure, I think did save us some money.
It did cost us in other ways though.
Yeah,
Yes.
but, so,
That's where you have to be very careful, because there's a certain amount of administration you need to keep everything in line,
right.
for lack of a better way of
So-
wording it.
But we're not gonna avoid, like what you're saying, we're not gonna avoid some of these administrative
But
costs.
in furtherance of what I said at the last budget committee meeting, when I looked at that 8.2 and I said, that's too much. You did knock it down almost a full percentage point.
About 0.6.
0.6, all right, over half.
Better than half,
So,
yes, yeah.
at least you took some of what I said to heart.
Yeah, and we are following the board's direction. Tomorrow we'll be giving some suggestions to the board on things to consider. But everything, because everything at the school is status quo from last year, and it's contracts, inflation, and those things that pushed it up, but there's no increase in FTE from where we were. So, every one of those suggestions will have some impact. So the board will have to think about those items in light of the suggestions that you're and the considerations from this group, and what they feel is the program they want to offer. And so there are choices to be made and things to consider. And that's their role as policy makers, to take the wishes of the town, the needs of the school, and mix that all around and come up with some sort of a direction. But we are making considerations tomorrow night.
Yeah, it seems the only relative constant is the number of students.
Yes.
Yeah, the students, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interestingly in the Upper Valley, unlike really the rest of New Hampshire that sees declining student enrollment every year, the Upper Valley is seeing either, the same or increases, year to year.
Well, the other thing is the Upper Valley's got very low unemployment rates, so it's a place people go to get jobs if they can find housing.
Well, that's,
I had a question about, how do you actually, when we see cost per pupil, do you just take the overall operating budget and divide it by the number of students, or is there some other formula?
No, the cost per pupil, so the values that I use, and I assume the school uses, come from New Hampshire DOE. And in a town that follows a tuitioning model like ours, the cost per pupil is the operating school. So it's the K-8 operating budget minus transportation costs, minus any revenue that the school receives in the form of tuition, divided by the total number of students in attendance at that K-8 school.
Okay.
And high school becomes a challenge for DRA to manage because it's revenue on another school district's paperwork. So they say, they just sort of ignore it. Where New Hampshire DOE does consider our total pupil number is when they calculate our equalized value per pupil, which is their way of measuring a town's fiscal capacity to sort of pay for school.
Okay.
So that's the total assessed value that, so what we can tax divided by the total number of students that attend public school. So that value captures the high school students.
the fact is, the basic budget, bottom line, is the cost to educate those students.
Is the cost to educate all
You have
of
300
them.
students,
Yes,
you divide that 8.
you
something,
divide that, yeah.
And that's the cost, that's the true cost.
Well,
costs.
Well,
I mean,
that's the
they-
true cost,
yeah.
but we do get some aid, both federal and a minor amount of state aid. That comes in as revenue, as well as the federal is special education grants. So it's not, when you look at the bottom line and say the school needs to raise $8 million, they're not actually raising $8 million from the townspeople of Lyme. It's probably approximately $1 million less than that, or
So if you
less
look at
than
the
$1 million.
revenue
There's
page,
a revenue page.
the revenue.
Oh, we have it.
There's a revenue page that was
Yes.
passed out. Now,
So I think,
one
But-
thing I'd be cautious about revenue though is when you compare it to the last couple of years, a lot of that COVID money that was available is gonzo.
Well, and we didn't, in the budgeting process, we didn't put COVID grants in there, in the budgeting process, because we were spending those dollars on things that were not part of the budget.
Cleaning and.
Okay.
Yeah, things that were above and beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we
Yeah.
do that, talk about the revenue?
Yeah, but by the same right, some of the COVID money that was spent replaced a future expense like the HVAC system upgrades. Because you got COVID money to pay for them, they're not something that's sitting in a future facilities improvement in the next few
right,
years.
one of the things that happens is, we've spent ESSER 3 money on supporting our technology, to go back to technology.
Yeah.
So some of that right now is currently being carried by that grant. That grant is gone next year,
Yeah.
and so that's a cost that we, and I will say that in the spring of the past year, the school board worked really hard at trying, and we surveyed other schools to try to find the most economical way to meet those needs in Lyme. And looked at different models at different schools, and I think we're very competitive right now with our costs, probably cheaper than some schools who are using much more expensive contracted services than what we.
For
Yeah.
technology in particular, is it, or
Pardon me?
just overall, or
Overall.
technology overall?
Yeah, overall, so, I think we're in a pretty good place, with that at the moment, so,
You
but
can
that's,
get
that
back
is
to-
one of the, yeah, that is true, that
Let's
can
get
happen.
Brian
So
have a chance.
we're talking about cost per pupil, so that's
Right.
a denominator and a value equation, right? So part of the question is, are we getting good value for our money? To channel my inner Bill Malcolm. So the numerator of that equation is tough, right? Because what are we using for that? Are we using test scores? Are we using
Well,
how
the
happy kids are.
numerator to calculate cost per pupil is the
Oh, no, no, no,
dollars,
so-
but how do we assess the how do we
value.
assess whether we're getting value for the money that we pay?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So how are you gonna figure that out? What's the numerator? I mean, are you gonna use test scores? Is that the primary? Which is, I mean, it's tough because those are essentially surrogates too, right? For,
the test scores are difficult, and I'll
Yeah.
speak for myself here,
Yeah.
and I've had this conversation, so the school administration knows how I feel about this. And when you look at test scores, really the only thing that correlates with test scores is poverty. And
Yeah,
when
I was
you,
gonna say.
and when you set those variables up, the schools that have the highest proportion of kids on free and reduced lunch have the lowest test scores. We have high test scores, we have relatively few kids on free and reduced lunch, which is, and, you know, and saying that is not to say that the school itself does not have inherent value, that the programming doesn't have value, but it is true that our kids show up at that door with like what I call social capital, and it becomes difficult to use the test scores as a metric of success. So other metrics that New Hampshire uses are attendance rates, and we have high attendance rates, and that's a good sign of a strong school. And they use graduation rates, which is a little more difficult for us because we don't operate a high school, so our kids kind of tend to get lost. But we do know, in general, that we have a relatively high graduation rate for kids who grow up and go to school in Lyme, and that they go on and, you know, to good colleges, and those are also metrics that you can use.
Yeah,
But
they're-
it is difficult, and so what I'll say is that one thing that I've done is tried to find comparator schools and to say, well, are there schools that are getting those same outcomes that look like us socioeconomically and in size? And are they spending the same, more or less? How much money are they spending? And when I see that they're spending less, and sometimes significantly less, like in Grantham, they're spending $20,000 per kid, that does not include high school. They have a much less expensive high school cost. It makes me and the rest of the members of the budget committee and board say, how are they doing that? What are we doing differently? And I will tell you that one thing they're doing differently is that they have fewer programs, some specific programming that I can point to that we have that they don't. One of those things happens to be an academic director. They don't do language in K through 6 in Grantham. We do in Lyme. Do they have a design lab? I can't remember. Right? And so and I'm not sitting here saying we should decimate all these things and we should get rid of them. And I'm also not saying that I can tell you with certainty that the things that we offer in Lyme are or are not providing some very specific and unique value to our kids. All I can tell you is how much they cost and what it would cost if we didn't have them. I don't know what would happen, right? We would have to take those things away
it would be
and leave
randomized
the
controlled
population
trial,
of the
like this,
school unchanged and come back in 10 years and say,
No, I
did
know.
anything change? But you can't, you know,
No.
I'm a scientist that wants to like
Yeah,
control
same with me,
everything,
so-
right? And there's no real control. So all I have are these like surrogate comparators.
Can we,
And their choice, and
yeah,
like, I don't know who just said it, but it's just, I think Frank said it, or somebody just said it, it's just choices. But I think because of the way that we raise the money to fund our school, it becomes a community choice, which isn't maybe the best.
right. Can we talk some more about when we were talking about the operating budget and how that is not all gonna be funded by taxes, that there is some revenue involved in offsetting that cost?
There was a sheet that we got on revenues.
We got revenues, but I couldn't, I don't see that in this sheet. Are we talking about grants and things, or I was having trouble reading this sheet?
Oh, okay, I don't know, you want me to?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the budget piece of the revenue is the third column. The pieces that I know, and I usually work from the bottom up because I wanna anticipate my grants first. So I know that we're gonna have IDAB grant money for the 55 and the 770. Can you see that, 55,000?
Yep,
And then the 770. So we will get that IDAB grant money that I know we're gonna get it right now.
Okay,
The other grants that we do get, we get Title II and Title IV and Title I monies. Those I don't know what the number is. So I can't anticipate either the costs or the revenues in the budget process. Then we move into the food service line. So the 25,000 fund transfer is actually a line item coming from the expenditure part of the budget. We always have to transfer money into food service, and we're trying to offset what we're missing in revenue due to the costs of the program. By putting in the fund transfer line, the only other revenue we're gonna get in food service is food service sales revenue. Because these we're not part of National School Lunch Program anymore. So the food service aid, the child nutrition program, and the USDA commodities, we will receive zero funding on all of those lines. So and the problem with a food service program is it's considered an enterprise fund. It has to support itself. And so the food service program is usually sort of almost like a whole, because you spend so much for the food and you really don't make enough money coming in to sustain the program, so the school always has to support it.
Well, we're subsidizing it to $225,000 a year right now.
At least, in some years it's greater and some years it's less. So what you do is you balance it out at the end of the year, and that's one of the last numbers we actually figure out in June.
okay.
So, but this is a guesstimate, and this balances out the revenue side, the expenditure side of the budget, because if you look at food service on the expenditure side, the total is 115,000.
Okay, I got you,
Okay.
all right, I got you.
All right, and then we work our way up. So we have Federal Forest Reserve, that's a federal grant we get every year. The piece that's not in here, and I still have to work on this piece, is the vocational aid line. So the state is supposed to pay 75% of the vocational tuition that we spend sending kids to voc programs in high school, but they never do. And last year, I believe that the rate of revenue we got was about 23% instead of 75%. So it's always a guess, so I have to guess based on the number of students, and I haven't done that calculation. But it should be around anywhere between 15 and 24,000, will probably be in that line. The equitable ed aid, those numbers and the state tax number, those are coming from the state itself. They release those numbers in November, and they send us a report, and so we have those lines to put in there. Other local revenue, this is coming from programs that we have at the school, like the after-school program, that pay fees to use the building. So that's what that money is. Interest on investments, that's interest that we get for the checking account, the general fund account. And the very last line is the last line that's calculated is the current appropriations line. That's your tax, that's the tax line.
That's the tax line, okay.
Okay, so that line plus the state tax line, and Dina can tell you more about this, then those two lines come directly from the town.
Thank you.
Yep.
In other words, we're gonna get more money than what's shown on this sheet in all probability.
So we will get more money on the revenue side, but honestly, this sheet, although it's a budgeted sheet, the final numbers don't come out until next August.
Yeah.
When we're setting the tax rate.
Yeah. Right.
It's fun.
I know.
So
I know that for being a selectman.
Yeah.
Right.
It's sort of a really early look. It's very early, but.
Yeah.
Well, I also want to say I appreciate that the school board has gone to the trouble of doing, starting from zero and looking at the budget this way. I think it's probably been very instructive to you all, and I think it's been good.
There are surprises sometimes when you do that, so.
All right, I'd like to go around because some of the people haven't either said anything because they don't want to say anything, or because they didn't get an opportunity. Rick?
So I was struck, I did read Mr. Burke's statement from the last time, and I was struck by his assertion that the school budget's been increasing by 10% a year over a long period of time. I don't have the numbers to see if that's the case. If that were, I think his advice to say, how can this body give advice to the school board to look to a long-term plan to manage that growth? I mean, and so, I don't think it's wrong for this body to say that to the school board anytime, in the kindest possible way. But especially if it were true that we've been seeing 10% increase over a decade or two. I see Elizabeth shaking her head, so perhaps that's not the case.
I personally don't know those numbers, but I can tell you that we are entering into redoing our strategic planning next year. And it's very clear to me that sustainability and affordability are two pieces of that really need to be worked on. And hopefully there's some good support in the community to help bring some expertise to that as well.
Right.
So
would it help you to have this body give advice as to what the townspeople might accept? I don't know how we would get there.
I'm gonna speak for myself,
Yeah,
because I
that's
don't know how
fine.
the board may want to approach that, but what I'm involved with, and I'm interim for this year at this point, so when I do strategic planning,
Mhm.
I like to do a very broad community look
Mhm.
and get as much input as possible from as many people as possible. And then I like to have community-type forums where stakeholder groups, and certainly this is a stakeholder group, that represents a lot of folks. So they're invited in to then give input. And I don't know how, I also, when I form those committees, I look for representation from those stakeholders. So it's not just school people writing the strategic plan, but there are parents there are community members there, and folks who have good management skills that they may be able to bring to us and ideas, so.
Okay,
Yeah, so there'll be opportunities.
excellent,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
I ask my questions.
Sue?
I'd like to quote the governor of Vermont, which I think is relevant from his inaugural address to our talk and our budgeting. He said, "I want to be clear, this isn't the time to increase the burden on anyone. We are certainly can't ask lower and middle income families to cover the cost for wealthier neighbors." I also echo what you said, we're asking people to leave town. When we do this, we can't be unmindful of the fact that can't afford this. People that deserve to be here much more than we do, who have been here for generations. And I think it's a cop-out what Bill Malcolm says, that we have to have the experts make the decision for us. We are the budget committee, we decide how much money there is, they have to make the ends meet. So it's a cop-out to say, we don't know enough to make a decision on how much money they can spend. We should just have the guts and step up and say it. You can't spend this much. That's my comment.
Judy?
I don't know if Wilkes is still,
He's on
is he?
Zoom.
Let's see what Wilkes has to say.
Wilkes, you have to unmute. That little red microphone, click on that.
Do we have, do you?
He's working on it.
He's working on it, okay.
She
I
said
would-
to ask to unmute.
It's a blue button.
Oh, it's a
Oh,
blue button.
sorry.
I would like to say, given my youthful age, we have friends to who I echo, I don't know who said it, I could just hear it, to whom this kind of increase in the school budget makes life-altering decisions for older people who don't have perhaps the ability or opportunity of younger people to save money, make money, etc. I spent a good deal of my life in workout, turning companies around, and it's very easy to say we have to have this, we have to have that. But you can get by with things that perhaps you say you need or you don't. And what I'm referring to is, as Dick laid out initially, we have administration, we have education, which to me is where, in the classroom, where the rubber meets the road. You have physical plant. A lot of times you can get by with things in physical plant that you think you need to replace, but they'll last another 5 years. I was on one school board for 12 years, and things we thought were gonna fall apart, it's amazing how long they lasted. But I guess the main thing is, when people are given, saying, I'm sorry, we can't spend this much money, this is how much we can afford, it's amazing how creative they can be. And you can come up, and I believe we saw it ourselves in Lyme several years ago. I guess more years have gone by than I think, when we were going to expand the school or the school building, and they came in with a large budget, and a couple years later, a year later, came in with about half that amount and achieved the same thing. The thing that troubles me is that it seems that every time we save something, it has to be in K through 8. And do we have too many programs that we can't do them all well? Or should we just be in maybe not quite as nice a building and do those same programs? I don't know the answer. I don't think it's up to the budget committee necessarily to try to do the business of the finance committee at the school, but perhaps it is up to us to say, look, this is how much people in the town can afford to pay. Because I know people, I've only been here 14 years, but there are people who have been here a long time who can't afford their taxes. They can't afford, the cost of heating their house, paying for health insurance, buying food, and paying their taxes. It's a real challenge to a lot of people. And my guess is that many of us sitting around the table are perhaps not so stressed. And I think that we, as the budget committee, we are not the school committee, we are the budget committee, and we have a broader overview of, I think we have a lot of things in town that we need to think about, and perhaps by being a little tighter on the school board, figure out how to do it cheaper. That's my feeling. And I think there are people that are willing in the town, as there were when the school was expanded, the building was expanded. I know that funds were, magically appeared from places that weren't paid by all taxpayers, let's put it that way. If something gets cut, sometimes people will step up and it's not borne by all the taxpayers. That's just an idea.
Your turn, Judy.
Okay, thanks, Will. I applaud the work that was done over the last few weeks to find places to cut back. I am still very troubled by the 7.2 or 5 or whatever. And I would hesitate, I could certainly look through there and tell you what I maybe uneducated wise would tell you what I think you could cut, but other than to say I think it's still too big a number, and I think the Lyme schools are awesome. I really would hate to impact them, but I do agree that people in this town are suffering, and it's a big number, a 7% increase. If it could be a 5%, I think people would be more comfortable with it. And we know everything's in flux, everything costs more than it did. You gotta have heat, you gotta have electricity, you have to have teachers. So I don't have a crystal ball, I can't tell you, but I would love if the finance committee of the school board and the other members of the school board and the administration could sit down and maybe agree on a few more cuts that would bring it down a little more, I think that would be really awesome.
I just end by saying, my comment was when I looked at it, the area to me that seemed prone to cuts. Now, you can explain it, but this is just looking at the numbers, seem to be in the administrative area. I know from past experience, efforts to cut programs have a habit of being put back in the budget at school district meetings. So it's not always results in the end of being a cut. Whereas when you cut administration, it seems to be something that doesn't come back in the budget at school district meetings. But by the same right, you need enough money to have an administration that can run the schools. And
We're also legally obligated
well,
to have a superintendent
I
and
have
an
heard the
assistant
law
principal.
requires too many times in the last 50 years referred to things I want to do that are not required by the law, that's not a good argument to me.
Well, no, but I'm just saying, but that is true. We need somebody on staff, I think Frank will
Well-
say that this, we need someone on staff who is a certified New Hampshire superintendent, and we need an assistant principal
Well,
at our school because of the size. But we have a principal, which I'm not arguing against, but that's the legality of our school.
I am just telling you that if the only argument you have for something is the law requires it, it usually is not a very good argument, not with me at least. You have to explain, if the law requires it, there may be some reason that the law requires it. And that's what I wanna hear, not that this is what the law says.
Yeah, what are they gonna do if you don't do it?
Are the consequences.
There are consequences, I think we have a couple more people to speak.
All right,
Did we start with James?
Yeah, I'm good.
I think we've been around the table except with Jen.
Well, I mean, I guess just, I mean, I'm not really sure exactly what to say other than,
You'll be back next week.
Yeah.
yeah, and I guess to Wilson's point, he expressed some dismay that it's the K through 8 budget, right, that is gonna get, that's the one that's going to get cut. And I have also expressed that dismay in school board meetings before. But that's the reality, I think, of our situation. We can't change the SAU structure. I don't believe the town would support it. High school, unlikely that high school is changing. I mean, if we want to have, as a town, conversations about that and have a community forum and see how people feel, I mean, those are long-term objectives, but I would not take them off the table as a means of introducing some sustainability to the trajectory of school cost growth in the town of Lyme. Do I see those as feasible in a realistic political sense? No. So we look at the K through 8 budget and we look at the K through 8 school. I will say that as, for myself, I have felt a bit frustrated, not only as a school board member, but also, it happened on the listserv today, to be a member of the school board, that when you say, I think that the cost, the trajectory of cost, the growth of cost here is not going to be sustainable, it is a knee-jerk reaction to turn around and say, you don't support education, you don't support our kids, you wanna ruin the school, and you get demonized. And it's, and it's frustrating, and I wish, I would encourage people who are sitting at this table today who have these ideas to come to tomorrow night's school board meeting. And I think that you will see a large contingent of people come out and give public comment, and it would be, it would be helpful to hear a comment from, because I am going to hear the opposite tomorrow night, I think, in the public comment that shows up to the school board. So, I don't know if that is if that answers the questions, but.
Well, one thing I think that we could do is maybe educate a little people about basic economics. 8% doubles in 9 years. So the kids who are in kindergarten, when they get into 8th grade, if we keep up at 8%, the budget's gonna be double. Do you think your income's gonna double between now and then?
No, I'm
Let me tell you,
good.
people over 50 or 60 years old, their income's not gonna double. And just say, hey, you gotta think about this. People are, you got people who got kids in school, who bring the kids to school and they move out of town, And,
Can I just ask a question, and I don't want an answer tonight, but how much money could we save, or is there a potential savings if we say, we give up school choice and say, we're going to send everybody to Hanover?
Unlikely because that's,
No,
I think.
no, I'm asking, how much money would be saved, if any?
We would have to look, the problem is Vermont, the way that they charge tuition and assess costs for special education are a little unique. I don't think that we would save a significant amount of money sending all of our children to Hanover. I don't also based on, and I have not gone to the Dresden board in an effort to negotiate, but Jonathan Bogle, Matt Hayden, and I've been involved with the board for some time, they have made that overture, they've made those efforts, and they've gotten, it's like a brick wall.
There's some history there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think if they're not receptive to that overture from Lyme, and I think that when I first moved to town, I was on a school study group about school choice, and I don't have the number in my head, but it was actually voted on by the legislative body, and I would say something like 99% of the people in this town, from the poorest to the wealthiest, all voted to keep school choice.
From the young to the old also.
Yes, everyone. It seems to be sort of inherent in the fabric of the town, but I know that a few years ago, they looked at school choice, and they looked at if we sent more of our children, if we went choice of 2 places, what would be the savings, or what are the 2 places? And I mean, it gets pretty complicated pretty quickly, but it's always, I think, worth looking at it, having a study to look at it again. But some places are receptive to trying to work out something better with Lyme than other places are.
Yeah, but.
Well, I was gonna say, I don't think Hanover's negative because it's Lyme. They have the student body. They
Yeah.
don't, they're not starving for tuition,
Yeah.
kids.
In
So
fact, there have
it's
been
not-
years where we had to beg them
That's
to let us
right.
send
Yeah.
us.
I don't think they necessarily want all of our kids.
One year, when my daughter was a sophomore,
The
they
kids
couldn't
that
go to Hanover.
were there.
well, they're not the cheapest school anyway.
No, they are.
Right, no, that's not the cheapest
Well,
alternative.
But
mean-
Hanover got them, Thetford.
No, they
Yeah,
are,
Thetford.
Hanover is they may have the most expensive tuition public school rate in the state. I would also say we could bring in 5 realtors and they would tell you, if you don't have Hanover High School
Right.
on your list, well, it's not gonna solve any problem for us. And that, the town's overall assessed value would go down within a decade,
Oh,
that would.
sooner than
Well,
But
Yeah,
we've all heard this story, but I think it can be summed up that every time it's even whispered,
yeah, people would come out and.
the public
yeah.
are so overwhelmingly in favor
Yeah.
of maximum school choice. And I would also say that seems to be a favorite for a lot of places that don't have it, going to school choice rather than going from school choice. If you look at the country as a whole, the way education seems to be going. That seems to be the direction.
If I can,
This ain't gonna float a sinking ship, so might as well do something else.
if I can
James,
bring
thank
it
you,
back
Elsa.
to the, difficulty that people are having paying their taxes and the people on fixed income. And I appreciate people's comments on that, and I'm very concerned about that too. But one of my concerns is also about if we shave off 3 or 5 more % of the school budget, how is that really gonna affect their ability to pay their taxes? And aren't we, would our efforts be better directed towards finding some way to assist those individuals instead of trying to nickel and dime the school?
Well, it's not nickel and dime, it's cumulative. You do 8% this year and 8% next year.
Well, that's not how it's, cause I don't think we raised it 8% last year. I think last year it was maybe 2%.
No, it was
Five point something.
it was
Oh,
5.3.
Yeah, it was a
I mean, I
little
can,
over
I'll write that, I don't have that on my fingertips, but I'll get that for you the year.
Let's
Yeah,
not, let's not
couple of
say we're gonna be
Actually, I
doing
do have
10
that.
or 8% every year, cause I don't think that's
Well,
the reality.
I wonder if we could,
I mean, I've got the data at home, but
Yeah.
I don't have it with me.
Because
But
we
I-
still have the warrant to look at, and
Yeah.
we have some more business
I
to
think
do.
we have some people in the audience that haven't been called upon yet. Elizabeth?
Thank you, I'm here to listen.
Elizabeth?
Here to listen.
All right. All right, I think we've had a pretty open discussion on the operating budget, which is primarily what we've been discussing. And I think what I sum it, where we are right now, is there is concern on this committee about the budget going up 8% or 7.2, 7.6 this year. And we're very happy that you were able to find some cuts that everybody could agree to on the school board and administrative area. But we would like you to take a further look and see what you can come up with before next week's meeting. Because next week, I think if I look at the schedule, is the one we decide what numbers to take to the public hearing. So we would like to give you another chance before we decide what to go to the public hearings with. And the other item is, we haven't talked about the warrant at all yet. And when I look at, we've been talking about Article 2, which is the operating budget. And nobody thinks anything about the salaries of the school district officials, because that's sort of a laugh at the end of, after we argue about $6 million, we have a $1,000 article at the end. The issue, there are two issues there, articles. One is the building maintenance project at 90,000 proposed, and the other one is any surplus going into the maintenance capital reserve. And yet, somewhat to a degree, these two are related because they have to do with the physical plant. We haven't discussed the building maintenance projects at all yet.
So the basic projects really are, we've been doing 3 classrooms a year with refurbishing and upgrading. And one of the issues with that, and some floor work and like that, and so we put, basically that's the 90,000 is to do those rooms.
That's 3 classrooms?
I think that's all that's in there,
I
right?
think so, yes.
Yeah, because, and one of the problems we have with that wing of the building is that underneath the existing floors, there are asbestos tiles. And so the real question, which some guidance would be helpful, is if we, should we continue this road with 90,000 a year for the next few years to get the whole building done that way, or does it make more sense to spend a little money this year to bring in an educational architect firm to get a really good idea of what that older part of the building really needs to be upgraded. The cafeteria also has asbestos under some of the paint, or lead under some of the paint. So that's 2 areas that are of concern to me. So some schools tend to do it piecemeal like this, you know, year to year with warrant articles. They try to build up a maintenance or a building repair fund to do it all at once. Others, what is it gonna cost to actually put this building back into proper condition and do a bond for 10 years or 15 years or something to do it as a bond? But roughly, yeah, it's about 30,000 a classroom to redo, yeah.
But
I'll
this does
just-
not include asbestos removal, this
No,
number.
No.
All right.
This does not include
It
asbestos.
does
I've
not.
had
Does
some,
not.
quite a bit of experience with asbestos removal on ships, and it's very expensive.
Yes, it is.
And the most important takeaway from that is, as long as the asbestos is encapsulated, i.e. the asbestos
Yeah.
floor is covered by an unbroken floor,
Right.
you don't have to remove it.
Correct.
Because removing it stirs up something that's buried and forgotten, for lack of a better way of wording it. So you have to be very careful when you decide to remove it, whether it really is the right course of action to take. And the other question that I'd bring up with this, because it really keys in, is the next article, is to whether it is more appropriate not to put the 90,000 in as a special project, but to handle it through the facility trust fund, and by putting money in the facility trust fund to do it.
You should, the cafeteria has breakthroughs.
We have breaks in the tiles in the cafeteria, so that asbestos seal has been broken there. There's also outside, and I believe you refer to them as tile or some kind of a clapboard or shingle on the outside of the building that is crumbling, and those are asbestos as well. And then there's breakthroughs in the main hallway by the office, in that older section of the building. You can see where the tiles on the floors are wearing down and the asbestos tile is breaking through. So we do have very specific places where we have
Well,
big problems.
as I say,
Yeah,
if you can keep it encapsulated, that's, allows you to wait until you really do a rehab.
Well, I think that's where Frank's
And I
referencing
think
the
that's where you
idea of
have
the
to look
study
at it.
because of the breakthroughs.
Yeah.
So you could go and do those and not address it holistically, but because of the breakthroughs, it may make sense to look at it holistically, but we have to have it assessed. And maybe
Yeah.
that's the figure that we put in to ensure that that can get done, because that becomes a real safety issue.
Well, the other question is whether you can do it through the trust fund rather than as a.
We don't have that much
Have
in the
enough
trust
money in
fund,
the trust
we don't have
fund.
enough money.
All right, I'm just,
No, it's a good point, I'm just saying we don't have enough,
I mean, that's my question that immediately comes up.
but that is
Or do we
the,
put the money into the trust fund rather than relying on surplus? And then that means we delay it another year because you can't take money out of a trust fund that you put in the same year.
even if you have a special meeting? No,
I think you can do a special meeting, can't you, Dina?
I wasn't listening, I was
Oh,
looking.
You
I
wouldn't
was looking at
qualify
the
as a
schedule, I'm
Meeting,
sorry.
trust fund,
Take
And
money,
anyway, let's,
you have to vote on it.
that's an item to look at, as
Yeah, you can do it,
to
I
how
think,
much
at a
has to
special
be
meeting.
done before the trust fund can cover it.
Right.
Because I would like major items like that, I think is why we created that trust fund. So therefore, I don't like seeing something that should have been part of the trust fund showing up as a single warrant article. That's my personal opinion.
Well, originally, the trust fund was designed for like furnace and heating and things like that.
Roofing.
Yeah.
This was an item that we weren't fully aware of until we looked at the asbestos study that was done, and we realized that we had these issues. So this is a new issue that is, right?
Yeah, and I think last year, there was an article, the 70,000 special article to help with some of this
Yes,
work.
which we did.
So this is not that different from what you did last year, it's just a little bit
I'm
more.
just saying, when the budget's up 7.5%, one of the first places you look is that $90,000,
Well,
which isn't in that 7.5%.
Well, that would, no, it's not, that would add another percent, so.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
so it's
And-
I'm just throwing that out.
8.5.
It's something that has to be looked at. And it has to be something that you can justify on the floor of the school district meeting, because somebody will bring it up.
So, I am far and away not an economist or a CPA, but the work that I have done in this town on the budget committee or on the select board makes me personally more comfortable with putting the money into the trust fund and building up the trust fund and getting sort of an overview of what you're gonna need and what you're gonna want, and then at one point in time, doing the whole project.
Yeah, I agree.
Broken tiles is certainly a concern, and I
Yeah,
can
so
understand.
some of that we have to just fix, we
Yeah.
can't.
Correct, and I
Yeah,
understand that, but otherwise philosophically, that's my personal preference, which I believe is what you asked for. And I think you had a question about how these trust funds work. And I think, I don't know if someone else wants to answer that better than me, I have an idea.
Go ahead,
I
Judy.
think- Well, I think it's, you have to vote to put money into the trust fund, and then depending on the type of trust fund and who was authorized at the time the trust fund was created, is
Sure.
how you know whether it's a legislative body annual meeting, or whether it's the school board or the select board, and it,
Or the Conservation
or
Commission,
whatever, it depends
or
on
the police chief.
how it was authorized
all
when
take
it was
it.
created. And
Yeah, you can look in the town report, and there's a list of who is the authorizing agent
Right,
for each fund.
I'm less interested in the authorizing agent. I mean, that's critically important, you can't spend it without them.
Right.
But how much money is there available to do
It's in
any
the
of
town
these?
report,
so
the balance
that
of each
also,
of the
the
funds.
balance would be in, sort of grab last year's town report and look.
Okay.
I actually, it's hard to read it in the town report, cause it's this long,
Okay.
so I actually have it, if you
Well,
want
I've
to
got,
look at it.
well, she's got her funds. There's not much in that fund, I don't think.
No, it's like
Okay.
maybe
Huh, yeah,
we
not
might
that much,
spend
okay.
some
That's-
this year.
But it is in the report
what's
there.
the magic number?
The magic number overall is 1,291,458,
For all your
But in
trust
the
funds?
All of them.
maintenance,
Okay,
what's in the maintenance trust? fund?
93.
Oh, it is that much.
Okay.
But I think
would
we're
say-
gonna end up using some of it this year.
Yes, I
From the
knew that,
93.
yeah, we're planning to take some out.
And I would second what Judy was saying too about, when I saw that question from the prior week about, doing a bond or whatever, instead of doing this piecemeal, I would agree that, getting the money together and doing it all at once.
If we need to do an asbestos mitigation in, a number of rooms, it makes no sense to do 2 of those
Yeah.
rooms this year and 2 of those rooms next year. Because the real crux, the real proportion of that cost is gonna come from the mitigation, and it's gonna be more affordable, right, if you just do it all
The real
together.
cost is sealing off all the areas where you're removing
Yeah.
the asbestos.
well, you have to do it in the summertime.
And everybody
Yeah.
getting in there in their zoot suits with positive respirators.
But that's where the cost of this project will far surpass what
Yeah.
what we're asking for here and what's in the trust fund. And that's when conceptually, the idea of bonding it came from, to spread that cost out over time and not ask for it from all the taxpayers.
Yeah, but you
in a
can spread
given
it out
year.
over time by making appropriations into the trust fund.
Well, and
But I
maybe
think, I don't know how
combination.
long, I'd have to defer to the facilities committee and facilities at the school. This maintenance, and maybe this also goes to the comment that Wilkes made, where when a budget is trying to be suppressed or cut, one of the things that goes first is building maintenance. Because, well, let's wait, let's see how long it can last, we'll wait. And that has been happening for many years at the Lyme School, and I think the bill is coming due.
That happened, it's not unique to the Lyme School. It
No,
happens
absolutely,
everywhere.
it happens everywhere,
I
and
mean-
then not unique to schools
I mean-
either.
I was on a ship that was built in the 30s that they finally spent $2.5 million to take the asbestos off of it. And that's how much it cost.
And that was a while ago.
That was 30 years ago.
That's when $1 million was worth something.
Yeah, and that was 30 years ago.
Do we have more business?
All right. Do people wanna bring up anything else? I see Janet in the back.
I just wanted to, direct your attention to one of these articles. And I probably should switch them. I should probably make Article 6 actually Article 5.
Oh,
So, because you're so used to seeing salaries of district officials as being the last thing on the list, I should probably switch them.
Good idea.
So I will do that, but, I don't have the proper language from the lawyer yet, and I just wanted to mention this because this is a money article, in essence. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
We're
It's
perfectly happy to let the legalese take out, but we're concerned with
Okay.
the dollar signs.
Okay, I just thought it,
Oh, right. The ban, I forgot about the ban,
The ban.
screening.
Does anybody have anything else they wanna make, or can we call it quits just before 8:30? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Nice
Thank you.
one.
I'm gonna put Wolves down as our,
Mover of adjournment?
at 8:27.
Wilkes moved.